All right, guys, so we're back. Thanks, Rudy, for showing us that. That's a lot of nice work there done on the themes. The next thing that I'm going to cover for you guys is the service builder. So the service builder is a completely new concept within Dex. What we've done is we've tried to address the challenge of building services currently. For those that have built services, the current methodology for putting it together a service is we use a C# microservice. That involves setting up a microservice, copying those scripts. It can be a very powerful functionality, and you can achieve a lot with it. But the trouble is sometimes you just need to do simple tasks. You may want to do a simple Mod 11 server-side check of an account. You may want to validate something that's pulled through off of an API. There's many types of simple server-side tasks that don't require the having to go through that overkill of having to set up a full microservice and configure SES to use it. So what we've come up with is the service builder, and the service builder is very nice because it allows you to build a service completely on platform. So when I say on platform, that means there's no outside setting up a C# or configuring or repointing to an external service. You're not going to need to now publish the service to IIS separately and manage those services. Everything is in platform. So I want to take you through the building of a service. I'm going to do it end to end, and I'm going to go through the whole process from creating our dummy data all the way through to validating our accounts. Now we're going to start off again in our account opening solution. So remember I mentioned we're continuing with the solution. So far we've put together a desktop. We've got a couple of apps that we're using in our solution. And the next thing that we'd like to do in this solution is I want to build a service. So when I say a service, I want to now build something very simple. I think a few people might be familiar with the idea of a Mod 11 check. It's a simple concept. All it means is that I need to validate something on an account. So for our basic service that we're going to build by the service builder, what we're going to do is we're going to create a service that sets up some dummy accounts for us. In this case, we're just going to create 5 dummy accounts. We're going to give them account names and some random check values, and then we're going to give it a is valid status or not valid. So to start off, we're going to populate those dummy records with the is valid being false. So all those accounts are false. We're going to have some random check values on there, which are just some random digits, and the value that we're looking for is 999. So what our service is going to do, it's going to process those accounts, it's going to run through each account, it's going to check the check value on the account, and if that account is 999, then it's going to tell us that this account is now valid, and it's going to update that account for us. So that is a requirement in our account opening solution, and I'm going to take you through the Dex scenario for building that service. So we're in our Solution Explorer, first point, and I'm logged in. I'm back here on the account opening solution. And what I'd like to do now is I want to build a new service. So I'm going to click Add. I'm going to click New. And we've called it a service app. So it's within the app section. And packaging this service as a service app, I think it's going to be really, really helpful going forward, because we need to remember the idea of reusability. So hopefully a lot of these type of services, I can build the service app for potentially even this functionality of account validation and make it reusable across solutions. So it may be that this Mod 11 check I want to use on a particular customer solution, and at some point in the future I want to use it again. So it'll be a simple process of packaging the service app and then deploying it to that particular customer or moving it to that solution. So the idea of packaging all of this within a service app, it's really helpful in terms of reuse. So what we want to do, we're going to create our new service app. We're going to create 2 service apps here. So the first app we're going to create is our service app that's going to create our dummy data for us, our dummy accounts. And then we're going to get into the crux of the solution, which is the validation service. That is the service that traditionally you'd be using, in practice, where I'm running a service and I want to validate some pre-existing accounts, because usually, on a customer site, I've got some accounts that come from an API or from an integration or somewhere, and I need to read those accounts and I need to apply some kind of logic. So in order to achieve that, we need to first set up our accounts. So we're going to create a small service that's just going to create our accounts for us. And one of the reasons I'm doing this, in terms of showing that the full stages of doing it is, again, I want to emphasize the user experience of Dex and how easy it is to do things. So I'm going to do this entire process from beginning to end without ever having to go to the back end and create tables or deploy services or anything like that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create create account service app, and I'm going to save that. And there we've got our create accounts. And now I'm going to double click. And yeah, I've come into my service builder. So the service builder, you'll see straight away, very familiar. Anybody who's used App Builder or is going to use the new App Builder, you'll see again, we've maintained that consistency. The theming is the same. The selected Dex theme that's currently in operation is now applied. You've got your header bar, you've got your waffle. And in terms of consistency, we've used the look and feel of the App Builder to create your service builder. We've also leveraged a lot of existing functionality from App Builder. So where there's overlap in terms of creating your data model, creating your tables, we've leveraged the existing Microflow functionality so that you can set up your service as a Microflow. So it's essentially a visual service builder. And so a lot of these features are going to be very familiar to you when I walk through them. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create a new data model. So we're just going to call this account data model. And I want to create a table. So we need an accounts table. We need somewhere to store our data that we're going to validate or store our accounts. So we're going to add a new table. And I'm going to call this table demo accounts or document. I use the word table or documents interchangeably. They're, similar concept. So I need to apply my file store. Now on my table, my documents, I need to create some custom fields. So what we want is we want an account name for our accounts. We want to add a is account valid field. So this is our field that when our service processes the account, it's going to update that field to be true or false depending on its validity. And finally, we're going to have a check value. So this field is going to store the value that our service is going to check to determine whether the account is valid or not. So we're happy with our custom fields in our documents. We are now going to click next. We want to finish. And there we have our demo accounts table. So the first thing we need to do after having saved this is we want to sync DB. So we want to create this table on our backend and our server. So we've created our demo accounts. We're happy with that. And now we want to quickly build our service that's going to allow us to populate those demo accounts. So what you'll see is a little bit of a difference between App Builder and Service Builder now is that the categories, we have a lot of similar categories. There you see your API category with its various sections. You see your data category with those various sections, and you see your logic category. You'll notice that what's missing here is the pages category. The reason for that being that because we're now building a service, this is now a backend functionality. And in terms of I'm building a backend service, the service when I'm finished with it is going to run on the backend. And so it doesn't make sense to, the pages is not relevant. Anything that's UI specific or relevant to the UI, is not going to be available to me when I'm building a service because it's an automated service. It's running on the backend. I just probably at this point, what I should tell you guys is that in terms of the backend and how we're going to be doing this is we've set up a new backend server. It runs Nest.js. So currently we have Cybran.core, which processes all of our C# type functionality. To achieve what we've done here with the service builder, we've set up a Nest.js server. And what that does for us is it allows us to now process TypeScript. So when we're writing our services, and I'm going to show you this now when we move into Microflows, we write everything in TypeScript. And the beauty of that is that we can leverage skills. So again, going back to our Cybran architectural principles, we're trying to use industry standards. And when we say industry standards, we're using a common language that's popular. A lot of developers are using it, and we're looking to leverage that. So if you're already building plugins with the Cybran plugin builder with the extension, and you're learning TypeScript, very quickly you're going to become a full stack developer because you're now going to be able to leverage those skills and build backend services with the same skill set. And anybody that already has TypeScript skills, you can now build services without having to worry about a separate C# skill set. So we're going to move into Microflow here. We need to set up our service. So we need to set up our Microflow so that we can start building, flesh out our service. I'll call this our main flow. And we start our Microflow. So the big difference here, when I'm in the service builder and I'm working with the Microflow, the tasks available to me, as I mentioned, we're building a backend service now. So the tasks available are going to be relevant to a backend service. So things like gateways, I can execute scripts. My entire data variable layer is available to me. So that's, our data binding layer for managing documents. locking documents, saving documents, making updates, and so on. That whole layer is available to us, and we're going to be expanding this as time goes on to really enhance the power of these server-side scripts. Things like integrations is coming very shortly, so that you can make integration calls via these services, pull data, manipulate data, and so on. So for us, what we need to do, we want to create a set of account records. So we need to call an execute script. We're going to run a script here. So I'm dropping that onto our Microflow. And then we're going to add our script in. So I pre-prepared a script. I don't want to code the whole thing live. It's going to take quite a long time. So I pre-prepared a script for us. But just before we save that script in, there's one more step that we need to make. So this script is going to be creating data for us on the back end. So currently we've created our data model, we've created our table. In order to bind our logic layer now to our data table, we need to create a data variable, because we're going to use the data variable within the script in order to create those account records. So I'm going to manipulate my accordion here. I'm going to go to data variables, and I need to add a new data variable. So our whole data models, data variable system that we've got in play, you've got your different types. In this case, we just want to go to data model, and we want to create, we're going to need a new create variable for creating accounts. We're creating a new create variable, which document, our demo accounts document, and our operation type create. And how many records do we want to create, or documents? We want to create 5. So I'm going to create 5 dummy accounts with the script using this variable. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to click finish. And there my data variable is ready for use. So I want to move back to my Microflow. And I'm now going to execute a script. So when this Microflow executes, I want it to now execute the script. The script, like I mentioned, I pre-prepared it. So I'm going to copy this in here quickly, and then I'll walk you through what it's doing. Sorry, I just need to check something quickly. I think I've named my field incorrectly on my table. 2 seconds. Yeah, sorry. I've named is account valid, is account fielded. It's not going to make a big difference to our thing, so I just need to change our script slightly to refer to the new field. But yeah, there's a slight inconsistency there, but I'll sort that out through in the script. So let's get back to our script. I hope you can see as I'm building and I'm working here, it's very easy. It's very quick and easy to navigate through. Right, so I'm just going to have to modify these field references here to, so is account field. And it's going to be easier to just change the field reference in the script rather than going and changing a whole table now. But this is the column that is going to tell us whether our account is valid. You'll notice while I'm doing this that we have full IntelliSense here. You can see how easily I am modifying the property on my table. When I choose properties dot, and I have all of my IntelliSense, all of my fields available. So fortunately, it's a fairly easy job to make that amendment. So we're going to run through the script quickly. So the first thing we want to do in our script, I'm calling my e.data. What you'll find in the scripting, so Daniel has done a lot of work for us in the scripting. This has, added a huge amount of power to the service builder in terms of what you can currently do. So we have a lot of helper services. We have the full data variable layer. All of this data variable is accessible via scripting, and I'm using that now to achieve this functionality. So the first line is e.data.dv account create. So I just want to show you again the IntelliSense. If I choose e.data, it now tells me what variables are available that I've created. If you remember, I created that dv account create variable. I'm choosing that, and then on that variable, I have certain actions. I choose my actions. And note at this point, we will have a full wiki with documentation covering all of this. So if you're a beginner, and you're just starting out with the scripting, we're going to have examples. And full wiki documentation explaining how all of the scripting is used. So I've chosen .actions. The actions available to me on the account variable creation is the create action, the save and release. In this case, I want to do a create. So what I'm telling my variable is I need you to create my documents. If you remember, we chose 5. So what's going to happen when it runs this, it's going to create us 5 internal documents. The next thing that I need to do is I need to not go and fetch those skeleton documents that's been created in my variable. So this line of code here is telling me, okay, get me those 5 documents and put it into this variable. What I'm doing here, very quickly, I'm iterating through those dummy documents or those skeleton documents, and I now want to assign values. So I've got 5 skeleton documents based on that table that I set up. Currently, they're going to have null values. This piece of code is going to iterate through those values, and it's going to assign data. So we're going to create a Ross Hyatt account, Sean Boert's account, Herman, Johan, and Johan Foley account. We are going to initialize all of our is account valid to false, and we are going to set check values for each of these accounts. So we're going to have some random codes, and we're going to set 2 valid accounts on Sean Boert's and Johan Foley of 999. Finally, we need to call work item service to update work items, and then we need to call our variable, and we need to call our action, and we need to call our save and release action. So this is very much, it's like a traditional allocate document. I've made some changes to that document. Now I want to save and release. So what's happening here when I save and release, I'm now committing those changes to the database, and I'm releasing those locks. Finally, we call the clear functionality on the variable, and that's essentially just to dispose the variable, clear the work items out, and we're happy. So I'm going to save that script. Yes, so we've had a question here in terms of the create variable, and can you add more than 5 items? So I'm showing you a very simplistic script here, but it's far more powerful than that. So we have functionality where you can actually dynamically create a variable on the fly. So what I've done is I've created a fixed variable in the system by going and creating that static variable and assigning 5. But what you can do within your script, if you want to dynamically choose the number of documents that you create, there's a functionality within the script here that I can create these data variables on the fly within my script. So at the point in time that I want to now create these variables, I will initialize it with the parameters that I want. So I can tell it I want to create type variable, and I want it to have whatever the count is that I need to set for that particular script. I want to do 10 documents. You could even assign a variable so that if it's run in an iteration loop, and it creates different amounts of documents per iteration and so on. So that's very much possible. Yeah, the scenario that I'm demonstrating is the most simple in terms of I have a static variable that's being created via the data variables in the menu, and I'm just using that to create my 5 dummy documents. But you very much can dynamically set that using the dynamic variable within the script. Okay, so we finished our script for creating our dummy accounts. The next thing that we want to do, and again, now back to the usability that we've been focusing on with Dex, the beauty now of using this TypeScript layer is not only that it's a familiar language to guys that already use it, but we can now run the script client side as well. So it's not a case of, I've created this now and I need to put it on a scheduler and just hope that it works. I can actually now run the script, debug it if it's necessary to find some issues, and see the outputs. I can, make sure the script works correctly on the client side first before deploying it, and then go through that step. So we're just gonna run through that quickly. So you see we've got the preview window like you did with the app builder. We're gonna hit preview from the service builder. That now, because we're in the service builder, it opens up our service application, and this is a sort of a runner console. So it knows now we need to run that service. It's waiting for us to hit run in order to start executing. The reason for this is if I need to debug, at this point I can hit F12 and open up my Google Chrome debugger. I'm not going to do that on this iteration, but I'm essentially just going to quickly run our service. And there you go. It's run our service. It's completed successfully. We've built a lot of logging into the flow, so you can see it's loaded our config. It's telling us it started our flow. It's telling us it started script execution. Our script execution completed in so many milliseconds. Our flow is completed, and the service is finished successfully. So to show you guys that, I'm just going to open up our table on the back end quickly, because I want to show you now our dummy data that's been created. Right, so there's our demo accounts that was created for us by... I unfortunately forgot to show you the table just before we ran the script to show you it was empty, but I can promise you it was empty. I'll show you on the next one before we run the validation. So you can see there our service builder. Through the service builder, we've actually created a brand new table. We've given it our fields, our properties. There you see we've got our account name. We've got our... I guess there's a good way to show that the table has been created live, because we've got is account field as opposed to is account valid. And there we've got our check value. So there's our 5 dummy accounts. Ross Hyatt, Sean Boert, Johan, Herman, and other Johan. They all initialized to false, and there's our check values, and there's our 2 valid check values. So that service is now run successfully, and we're happy with that. I'm not going to, at this point, show you the process of now if we wanted to put the service live, because this was essentially our service just to create our dummy records. So we're going to now go through this, the process of building a second service, which is more akin to what you guys would usually be building in a solution, which is I'm validating something that already exists. So we're going to close that there. We're going to close this service builder. We're happy with that service, and we're going to start constructing a second service. So our create account service is done. Now we're going to do add to our solution. We're going to do new. We want another service app. And this service we're going to call validate accounts. So we now want to validate those accounts that we've created on the back end. And I'm going to save that. Right, so there's our validate accounts. Again, remember with your tabs, if you wanted to, we could specifically have a service tab if I'm building a lot of services and I just want to work with my services. So you can see as I'm adding items here, this is already becoming now quite cluttered. There's a lot of objects. I had to scan through it. I can, at this point, if it was myself, I'd start adding tabs here so that I can more easily find the objects that I'm working with consistently. So we're going to go into our validate accounts. And again, it opens up the service builder. And I'm going to create a new model, and I'm just going to call this the validate model. And there we've got a blank validate model. So what is different now in this case is that, remember, in our create service, we've already created a new document. So we don't want to now create another document because we want to use that existing document. We want to process those existing dummy records or dummy accounts that we've created. We want to run through them and we want to validate them. So if you remember in Solution Explorer, we've got the add button that allows us add new, add existing. So you see there's very consistent patterns all the way through decks. When I click an add button, if I have the ability to add something that already exists, you'll see it's add existing or new. In this case, we want to add existing. Again, a familiar screen. I now have the object library I can browse through. And this particular object library, because I'm adding an existing table, is showing me specifically tables only. So I want to quickly add that existing table to my solution, demo accounts. So there I've added the existing table, and there's our table, our account name. We can spot it very specifically because of our is account field. Save, and we're happy with that. So the next thing we need to do now, if you remember, we want to set up a data variable, another data variable. So the data variable in this case, because previously we created a create variable, this time we actually want to read our data and update it. So we're going to create a different type of variable. We've gone to add variable, the variable type of data model, and we are now going to create a variable dv account read write. And we're going to specify a document, demo accounts, and the operation type that we want to use is a read write. Right, so there we go. We've set up our read-write variable. Now the next thing we want to do, again, we want to go and start building our flow, or we want to build our service using, you could view the Microflow in this concept as a visual service builder. So I'm going to add, I'm going to call it my main flow. I want to add at this point, again, we're building something really simple in the service builder in terms of I'm creating one flow, I'm creating one script. I don't want to make it too complex for a demo, but in terms of the power of this thing, I'm only creating one flow. Yeah, I could create multiple flows. I could have 10 flows. Within the flow, I can call further flows. So, you can build up a really complex service if the requirements call for it. For now, we're just doing one, but that is possible. So we've got our first Microflow, our main flow set up, and now we want to again add a script. Right, so something we're going to do different in this iteration of doing the validate script, I'm going to use a script from the global scripting repository. So what you saw before is we just copied in a basic script and we executed it. What we're going to do now, because we're actually validating those accounts, now the logic that happens on validating those accounts, traditionally, that's going to be something that is potentially going to be reusable. So the mod 11 check, or the check that I'm going to do, which in this case is just going to be to see whether the check value is 999, I'm now going to take that logic and separate it out of the script, and I want to put it into the script repository, because I may want to, when I'm building other services, reuse that logic again and use that same validation over and over. So what I'm going to do before I start building this script, I'm just going to go to my script section in the service builder, and I'm going to add a new script, and I'm going to call this the mod11 check. So this function or script that we're now creating in the repo is specifically going to hold the logic that's going to do our account validation. So I've created my mod11 check. I'm going to go into my script editor, and again, I've pre-prepared a quick script for us, but I'll paste it in here and then I'll just walk you through it. Right, so this mod11 check script now, you'll notice when I'm going through here, there's a template that's already generated for you when you create the script. If you read the comments, it's quite instructional. It tells you how you go about using the script from within your Microflow script, so you can walk through that at your own pace, and it's very descriptive in terms of helping you out with performing that. So the major area that I have changed here in terms of adding our functionality is that I've got my mod11 check class. This is now my reusable class for the future. And I've added a method to it, check valid account. So you see here, the check valid account method, I have told it that I want to pass in a check value of type string. And this method is going to return us a Boolean. So I'm going to call this check valid account from our service, and I'm going to pass in the check value that we're going to read from those dummy accounts. This method is then going to run a piece of logic. For our demo, we're just checking, is it 999? If it is, we're going to say yes, true, otherwise return false. When you're building a proper account opening solution, this could potentially be a very large piece of logic, making use of libraries, integrations, and so on in order to validate or whatever it is that you need to do that's commonly reused. So we're going to save that mod11 check, and we're going to go back to our flow. And we're going to write the main section of our script that we want to use here. All right, and then we just need to change this little property where I made the mistake, is account field. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through this. So what we're doing here now, this is the validation portion of the service. And the first thing that we need to do is we're telling this script that's being executed via the flow that I want to make use of the script repo, or I want to make use of a class in the script repo. So that mod11 check that I created in the script section, I now want to use that in the script. So I've instantiated an instance of that class, the mod11 check instance, and I'm going to use that further on down in the code. So the first thing I want to do is I want to, again, e.data, if you remember, it's now showing me my DV account read write variable that's now available to me to use. I call the actions because that that variable is a read write. It has a different set of actions. The major one being edit, which is similar to your allocate you used to use on documents, and then you've got your save or your save and release. So we want to edit. What that means is it's very much like an allocate. So we are telling this variable that go and get me those 5 accounts or those 5 documents and lock them and have them ready for me to now be able to do something with them. One thing I didn't mention, when we set up this read write variable, we didn't go into the filters. So because we haven't set filters, this read write variable is going to fire on that table and pull everything. A more likely use case is that you set up this variable with a filter and it's going to pull a particular set of information or documents. So the next thing we want to do is we've allocated or we've set those documents to edit mode. We've pulled them into the variable. We now want to get those work items from the variable. So we're calling our account read write get all items, and we're putting it into our local docs variable within our script. Now what we're doing is we're iterating through the docs. And yeah, you see we're now making use of our reusable function that we created within our scripts repo. So we're calling that mod11 check class, and we're calling that method that we set up, the .check valid account. What we're doing here, I'm just going to show you again the power of the IntelliSense. I'm going to do doc.properties. And there you see those documents that I'm pulling now, it's got all the fields available to me that's on that document. In this case, what we want to do is we want to pass the check value from that fetch document into the function, because we want this function to validate that check value for us. And the function is then going to return, yes, this value is true or it's false, depending on what's passed in there. The code we then check is the return of our function. We say, is it valid? If it's valid, what I want to do, I want to update this document. I want to set my is account valid to true. And also what I'd like to do is I'd like to send a logger out to my service runner console to actually tell, just give me some feedback to say that this document has been updated. And if it doesn't, if it's invalid, I'm just going to skip it. I'm going to leave it set as invalid as false, its default state, and I'm going to log out to the console that I've skipped this document. Finally, the last two things we need to do is we need to call work item service. We need to update our work items, and then we need to call our account read write variable, and we need to call a save and release. So we've now run through each of those 5 accounts. We've validated the check value. Depending on whether it's 999 or not, it's set the is account valid to true. If it's not, it's left it as false. And now we are saving and releasing those changes back to the documents on the DB. So we're happy with that, and I'm going to save that service. Right, so we saved. One thing I just want to mention before we move on to the preview is you'll notice here that I've tagged some debugger calls here into the script. So this time when we run the preview, I'm just going to show you the capability of the debugger. So we're going to run preview. And yeah, back we're in the service runner console, and we're now going to run the service. So as I mentioned previously, this step here, it allows me to, before running my script, I can hit F12, I can open up my debugger. So this allows me to open up my Chrome debugger. And what I'm going to do, I'm now going to click run, and I want to run my account validation on those dummy accounts. So before we do that, just to show you that my records are all still set as they are. So we've got our 5 accounts, they're all set to false. And we're now going to run our script. So because we've got our Chrome window debugger open, it immediately stops for us in those debugger tags. So yeah, you see here's my script, and here's my code. And what's very nice as well, Daniel's done a lot of work for us on this. He set it up so that we can debug in TypeScript itself as well. We don't have to worry about JavaScript. Yeah, I can step through my script. I can step through each action. The debugger, it's the Chrome debugger. It's really powerful. You can see, yeah, I've called my get all items. If I analyze that variable, there's my 5 work items. If I had to inspect each of those, you can see that first account, there's Ross Hyatt account, and so on and so forth. So I could step through each of these. I'm not going to do it now, but I could step through each of these and watch the script running as it runs. So I'm just going to F8. I'm going to close this debug, and I'm going to let the script run to completion. So if you remember, we added those logging statements into our script as well to tell us that if we don't validate the account, we're going to skip the document. Otherwise, we're going to update it. So you'll remember we've got 2 999 accounts. Those have both been updated, so our script is run correctly, and we've skipped the other 3. So I think we're happy with that. So let's quickly just take a look at our backend, and you'll see our service is now run. It has left our check values as false on the on the invalid accounts, and there we go. Our 2 accounts that we're happy with, the 999s, those have been set to valid accounts, and we're happy. So as the developer now, I've built my account validation service. I'm very happy with it. I've debugged it. I've done my testing. Now the thing is, how do I now deploy the service? Again, the beauty of this is that I don't now have to go and try and deploy something to IIS, manage it outside the platform. If I want to run this service within this system I'm currently building on, it's essentially that. I know I don't have to do any other steps. The service now exists. It's sitting inside of this instance of Cyber Enterprise. The only step that I need to take to automate this is I need to load it onto the scheduler. So I'm going to go back to Solution Explorer. I'm going to use the waffle in this instance. I'm going to go to Studio. And I'm going to go to my scheduler. All right, so again, because it's a service, there's 2 ways of accessing it. Either traditionally I'd be calling the service via an API, so you may have some kind of other service that's going to call the service. You may have an app that's going to call the service. There may be something calling it, or you're going to put this onto an automated schedule. So you want the service to run at a designated point in time. What I'm going to do for you guys is just quickly show you, I'm setting the service up on the automated schedule. So I'm going to add a new schedule. Sorry. Right, so we're going to add a new schedule. I'm just going to call it mod 11. And I'm happy with all that. Okay, I'm going to run this schedule once a day. And what do I want to add? I want to run a mod 11. So based on what I'm doing, yeah, this isn't typically the type of scenario you'd be creating in a business solution, in terms of you wouldn't be reprocessing these same 5 accounts over and over, or every account on this table. But it's just to demonstrate the how I'd go about now taking the service that I built by the service builder and putting it into an automated process. So I'll set up my mod 11. I'm choosing my process type of process. And now when I look through here, I can find, sorry, I think I called it validate account. There we go. So Solution Explorer apps, there you'll see there's validate account. I'm happy with that. I've finished. And there we go. It's as simple as that. That's our service now, the one that we've run, we've tested, we debugged, we were happy with it. We've set up our scheduler, our schedule, we've put it on the scheduler to run once a day, and that's it. So that service is now going to run for us. It's going to pull those records. It's going to validate them on a daily basis. All right. The other thing to mention at this point would be that we've set up this service on this particular instance of SES. It's obviously going to be the case that going forward we potentially going to want to use this service on different customers' setups and solutions. So what you would do at this point, if you needed to use this service now in a different environment of SES, is you would need to package the solution, take the solution and build it and then deploy it. So at this point in time, we're still using the backup restore for that functionality, but we do have in the pipeline, well, it's very much nearing the closing of development, is the new deployment manager. So you'll see there the deployment manager, the thinking behind this, or what we are looking to achieve, is that once the solution is now finished, we are going to be able to build the solution into a package and then deploy the solution to wherever we want. So if we want to deploy that out to a store, perhaps like a marketplace for somebody to download, perhaps we want to deploy it to some physical files because we need to deploy it manually on a site, or deploy it to a server that we want to pull from somewhere. So in order to now deploy this particular service to another site, that would be the typical process for sending it to another instance of SES. You don't have to worry about IS or anything like that. It's simply a case of packaging it and then deploying it via the deployment manager to the instance that I'd like to pull that service in on. So that. We've got a question. Yeah, so we just had a question in terms of the services in App Builder, whether they're organization aware. Yes, they are. They, depending on the token that you currently logged in on, if you logged into an organization aware system, that information will be available to you. So, of course, in your scripts, you're going to have to take into account that you are processing multiple organizations. But if that instance is organization aware, then when you pull your documents for a certain organization through a variable and so on, it will do it via the organization. So that is already built in. A lot of the organization aware type functionality is, it exists currently in the backend already. So when you make those calls via the data variable service and so on, it's going to, it's going to process the fact that you are working on an organization aware system, and it will build that in. You may need to do some work in your script in terms of just, depending on what you are doing, you may need to take account of the fact that there may be multiple organizations that return and so on. So yes, that has been thought of. Okay. So yeah, that's the new service builder. I hope you guys are looking forward to that.